Hello YouTube. So today I want to talk about the GEO element. As we all know, GEO is an element many people consider to be the worst element in all of Genshin Impact. Now, while I don't think GEO is as bad as it is made out to be, I also can't argue against it being the worst element. So today we are going to go into what I believe are the problems holding this element back and how I would fix it. So with that said, let's jump right into this. Alright, so the first thing we have to talk about is Crystallize. Crystallize is always the first thing people point out when it comes to GEO's flaws, since it is literally the only reaction GEO has, and all it does is create Crystallize shields. I actually think Crystallize itself is the least of GEO's problems, and not actually as bad of a reaction that people think it is. While the shields that Crystallize creates are very weak, and can't act as your primary means of defense over an actual shield or healer, they can still be useful for preventing you from getting interrupted. This is because if you get hit while shielded, even if your shield breaks from that hit, you will not be interrupted. This can actually be useful because of how easily crystallized shields can be produced, giving you a constant means of interruption resistance. As an example of a team that currently makes good use out of this is Wanderer, Farazan, Bennett, Yunjin. In this team, Yunjin is able to create 2 crystallized shields between her skill and burst, and even more so in AoE. These will often be more than enough to protect Wanderer from getting interrupted, thus allowing Yunjin to act somewhat as a mini shielder in this team, thanks to Crystallize. However, this reaction is definitely still flawed. Having to actually pick up the crystal to receive a shield can feel really bad and disruptive to the natural flow of combat, especially if you are fighting an enemy with a large hitbox, such as the prime OG of a ship. Sometimes the crystal will appear underneath it and you can just straight up not be able to pick it up even if you wanted to. So, this is one thing that I would definitely change. What I would do instead is, instead of Crystallize creating an actual crystal for you to pick up, I would have instead, anytime Crystallize is triggered, you just automatically receive the shield. No actual crystallized shards involved. Just apply GEO onto an element, crystal is triggered, you get shield. And I would even take it a step farther and have it so that crystallized shields can stack, sort of like Toma's shield. And what I mean by that is, if you receive a new crystallized shield when you already have one, I would have the new shield inherit the current HP of the prior one. As an example, let's say each crystallized shield starts at 2000 HP. You receive a new one before your current run took damage. Now you have a 4000 HP shield. Then you get hit for 3000 damage, you proc Crystallize again. Now you have a 3000 HP shield. This could get kinda silly in AoE though if it's counting for every single enemy it was procced against though. So I would give it a 2 per 0.5 second ICD rule just like Bloom. Meaning that if you have 2000 HP crystallized shield and you proc Crystallize on 3 enemies, your shield goes from 2000 HP to 6000 instead of 2000 to 8000. I think this would be a very reasonable way to balance the reaction. It would still be very risky to use as your primary means of defense on a team since the shields would take a while to stack and likely break before ever reaching very high amounts of HP, but it would be a more reliable means of interruption resistance than it is right now. But there is also one more thing we need to address when it comes to Crystallize, and that is the Archaic Petra set. Archaic Petra, if we look at just the buff it provides, should be an absolutely incredible set, providing a 35% damage bonus to the element of the crystal the wet wearer picks up. But it is severely held back by needing to pick up the crystal, as this once again completely ruins the natural flow of combat and can also be very disruptive to your rotations. While the change we made to the crystallized reaction itself, there is no longer a crystal to pick up, so naturally, this set would have to change. That would change it to you get the buff simply for triggering the crystallized reaction. This would make it so much easier and more practical to use than what we have right now. But there's still one more problem with the set. You can only have one element buffed from it at a time. This makes the set only really viable in mono-element teams such as Mono Pyro, since if there are multiple elements, you can't reliably buff the one that you want. This seems like a really silly restriction when a Nemo A much better element has the 4-piece VV set, which can have multiple elements resistant shred at the same time. So, I would remove this restriction and allow Archaic Petra to have multiple elements buffed at the same time. I think maybe we could also allow the set to be triggered from off-field, but that may make it a little too good. But let me know what you think about that in the comments. With these changes to Crystallize, however, I think GEO would already be in a significantly better position and way more universally useful. It would certainly no longer be the worst element in the game, definitely not when Cryo is sitting right there. But there are still a couple more problems to address, and the first one is GEO constructs. GEO constructs, in my opinion, are a cool way to make GEO unique conceptually, but the problem is they don't actually do anything by being constructs. The only thing in the game that actually directly benefits out of GEO constructs being constructs is Zhongli's pillars, which get more AoE from more constructs. But this is a very underwhelming interaction and very disappointing, as this could have been a really cool way to give GEO units direct synergy with each other. But as of right now, being a GEO construct is pretty much exclusively a bad thing. This is because GEO constructs have HP and can be destroyed by enemies. If you have ever played Albedo, you will know how bad this can be. All of his damage and particles come from his construct, yet it just breaks so easily whenever you're facing a boss, making him completely and utterly worthless whenever this happens. What I would like to do to address this is create a new artifact set that tackles the issue. The set I have in mind is something like this: 2-piece, 15% GEO damage bonus. 4-piece, each time this character creates a GEO construct, gain the following effects for the next 30 seconds. GEO constructs gain invulnerability to damage from enemies. Additionally, all party members have their attack and defense increased by 8% for each construct during those 30 seconds. With this set, now the problem of constructs breaking so easily can be fixed, and also you get actual value out of them being constructs thanks to the buff. I think the buff is pretty reasonably sized. If you are just using a double GEO car like Zhongli Albedo to support a team that they fit into, you'll be getting 16% attack and defense, but also able to have one of them on Archaic Petra as well. So now what the value of double GEO is 15% damage bonus from Resonance, 35% elemental damage bonus from Petra, and 16% attack and defense from the set. I think this would also make double GEO way more than just a comfort pick than it is right now. It would also, of course, be a pretty nice buff to mono GEO teams for that defense buff. But this would also be really cool for it to give GEO Traveler a purpose. GEO Traveler's burst counts as 4 total constructs and does not count to the 3 construct limit, meaning you can have 7 total constructs if GEO Traveler is on your team. So now, let's say you're using a double GEO car of Zhongli GEO Traveler instead of Albedo, and you use GEO Traveler skill once per rotation. Now you're getting GEO Resonance, Archaic Petra, and 6 constructs, so a 48% attack and defense buff, but also a 10% crit rate buff from Traveler's Constellation. That is a pretty big buff, but like, it requires using the Traveler, so I think it's fine and it would be a perfectly balanced way to make GEO Traveler a much more useful character. Now, the last problem that I have with GEO is that it doesn't interact with Dendro at all. This is really silly to me. We are talking about earth and plants. How the heck do those not react with each other? That has to change. I wouldn't have GEO interact with Dendro as an aura itself, because I want GEO to maintain its identity of being universal for not really messing with other reactions. Instead, I would have it interact directly with the bloom seeds themselves, similar to Hyperbloom and Burgeon. I would name this reaction Growth, and what it would do is, instead of blowing up seeds like Hyperbloom and Burgeon, instead, when GEO comes into contact with a bloom seed, a new seed will be created. Now, you can slap Zhongli as the 4th unit into a Quick Bloom team, not only get Archaic Petra for your Electro unit, and maybe even your Hydro unit, although that would be a lot more difficult because of the way Dendro and Hydro react, but also get occasional extra Hyper Blooms from him, or you could even use Albedo and get that plus 125 EM from his passive. This may sound like it would be too powerful, but remember that bloom reactions have a 2 per 0.5 second ICD on damage per target. But still, to prevent this from getting crazy for Hyper Bloom and AoE, I would give Growth a 2 per 0.5 second ICD for creating those extra seeds as well. So no matter how many seeds GEO contacts, you will always get at most 2 extra seeds. But yeah, that's everything I would change for GEO. I think if all of these changes were made, I think that GEO would go from being the rawest element in the game to one of the best, while also still being balanced and not overpowered. But what do you think? Do you think these changes are a bit too much? Not enough? Let me know in the comments below. Please also be sure to like and subscribe to this video if you haven't already. Really hoping we can reach 1,000 subscribers before the end of this year. Thanks. Bye.